The scene opens on a quiet suburban road, dimly lit by scattered streetlights. The faint hum of crickets fills the air as the FBI director, dressed in business casual attire, drives a nondescript sedan. Exhausted from a long day, they're focused on getting home, the hum of the engine blending into the stillness of the night. Suddenly, red and blue lights flash in the rearview mirror. Confused but calm, the director pulls over to the side of the road. A local police officer approaches, flashlight in hand, his demeanor tense and commanding. "License and registration," the officer demands sharply. The director calmly complies, handing over the documents. "Sir, I'm the FBI director. If you'll check my credentials." "Step out of the car, now," the officer interrupts, his voice rising. The tension in the air thickens as the officer places his hand on his holstered weapon. The director remains calm but wary. "Officer, I suggest you verify my identity before proceeding any further." But the officer refuses to listen, his aggression escalating. What happens next? Will the truth come to light, or will this encounter spiral out of control? Stick around to see how this tense situation unfolds, and if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more storytelling content. The situation escalates as the officer steps back, his hand still firmly on his gun. "I don't care who you say you are," he barks. "Step out of the car and keep your hands where I can see them." The FBI director, aware of the risks but unwilling to inflame the situation, slowly exits the car, hands raised. "I'm not resisting. Let's de-escalate this. My badge is in my jacket pocket. If you allow me, I'll show you." "I said don't move," the officer yells, his voice cracking slightly. It's clear now that his aggression isn't just authority, it's fear. He motions for backup on his radio. The flashing lights of additional squad cars begin to illuminate the scene, the quiet street now buzzing with tension. As the second and third patrol cars pull up, the FBI director stands motionless, keeping their voice steady. "Officer, your actions are unnecessary. Let's resolve this peacefully. Call my office if you're unsure of my identity. You'll get your confirmation immediately." The officer, however, seems unwilling to listen. He pulls out his handcuffs, approaching with unsteady steps. Before he reaches the director, another car speeds up to the scene, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. It screeches to a halt, and two individuals in plain suits step out. Their presence radiates authority. "Stop right there," one of them commands the officer, holding up an ID that identifies them as an FBI agent. "You're making a mistake. Step away from the director." The officer hesitates but doesn't back down. "I don't care who you are," he growls. "This man was acting suspiciously. He's under investigation until I say otherwise." The FBI agents exchange a glance. One of them moves to stand between the officer and the director, while the other steps closer to the officer, their tone calm but firm. "This is your last warning. Stand down and verify the director's credentials, or you'll face immediate consequences." The officer's face is a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. The arrival of his fellow officers emboldens him, but the unmistakable authority of the federal agents gives him pause. He looks around at his colleagues, seeking backup, but the other officers, sensing something bigger at play, remain frozen. "Fine," the officer finally says, lowering his gun but keeping a firm grip on it. He gestures toward the FBI agents. "You verify him. But if this goes south, it's on you." One of the agents nods and approaches the director, who calmly retrieves their badge from their jacket and hands it over. The agent examines it briefly, then turns back to the officer. "This is the director of the FBI. You've just drawn your weapon on one of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the country," the agent says, their tone heavy with warning. The officer's face goes pale as the weight of the situation hits him. "I didn't know," he stammers. "That's no excuse," the agent replies coldly. "You refused to verify his identity, escalated the situation without cause, and put lives at risk. You're done here." Before the officer can respond, the agent pulls out their phone and places a call. Moments later, another black SUV arrives, this one marked with government insignias. Federal marshals step out and take control of the scene. The officer, still in shock, tries to protest. "I was just doing my job." "No," one of the marshals replies as they place him in handcuffs. "Your job is to protect and serve, not abuse your authority." The local officers quietly disperse, leaving the FBI director with their team. The director takes a deep breath, their calm exterior barely masking the gravity of what just occurred. "Get his record," the director says to one of their agents. "I want to know if this was a one-time mistake or a pattern." The marshals drive the officer away as the director and their team prepare to leave the scene. The night's stillness returns, but the implications of what just happened linger heavily in the air. The next morning, the story of the incident breaks on local news. Headlines flash across screens and phones: FBI director held at gunpoint by local officer, accompanied by shaky cell phone footage captured by a passerby. The video, showing the officer shouting and brandishing his weapon at a calm, unarmed individual, ignites a firestorm of public outrage. In a sterile conference room at FBI headquarters, the director watches the footage on a large screen, flanked by senior staff. The tension in the room is palpable. One of the agents speaks first. The officer in question, Ryan Keller, has a history of complaints against him. Excessive force, insubordination, even allegations of racial profiling. None of them escalated to formal charges, until now. The director nods, their face unreadable. "What about his department?" "The local precinct is scrambling," another agent answers. "Their captain has already issued a statement distancing themselves from Keller's actions. They're cooperating with the investigation, but the damage is done." The director leans back in their chair, staring at the screen. "We can't let this slide. Keller's behavior isn't just a local issue, it's systemic. I want a full report on his record, the department's response, and any other officers with similar patterns. If there's a culture of misconduct there, we're going to expose it." Meanwhile, at a federal detention center, Keller sits in an interrogation room. His defiance from the night before has dissolved into nervous silence. A marshal enters, dropping a thick file onto the table. "Keller," the marshal begins, flipping through the file, "this isn't your first time crossing the line. But it might be the last. Excessive force in 3 separate incidents. A suspension for insubordination. Do you want to explain yourself?" Keller shifts uncomfortably in his chair. "I was just doing my job," he mutters. "That guy. I didn't know who he was. How could I? He wasn't in uniform, wasn't driving a government car." "That's the point," the marshal replies sharply. "You didn't check. You didn't follow procedure. And now you've pulled a weapon on the FBI director of all people. Do you understand how serious this is?" Keller doesn't respond. The marshal closes the file with a snap. "You're facing federal charges for obstruction, misuse of authority, and endangering a federal official. If I were you, I'd start thinking about a plea deal." Back at the FBI, the director addresses a press conference. Cameras flash as reporters shout questions, but the director raises a hand to silence them. "Last night's incident was an unfortunate reminder of the challenges we still face in law enforcement," the director begins. "The actions of one officer do not define an entire profession, but they do highlight the need for accountability, transparency, and training across all levels of policing. The FBI is committed to working with local departments to ensure that no individual, civilian or official, ever has to experience such misconduct again." The statement is met with mixed reactions. Some praise the director's measured response, while others demand harsher words and immediate action. Behind the scenes, however, the FBI's investigation into Keller's department uncovers troubling patterns of negligence and corruption. Officers with similar complaints are quietly reassigned or dismissed, and the department is forced to undergo federal oversight. Weeks later, Keller stands trial. The evidence against him is overwhelming, and he is sentenced to several years in prison for his actions. The fallout sparks debates nationwide about police accountability, the importance of procedural checks, and the delicate balance of power between federal and local authorities. For the director, the incident becomes a defining moment in their career. While it highlights the risks and flaws in the system, it also serves as a catalyst for change. They make it their mission to strengthen partnerships between federal and local agencies, implementing new protocols and training programs to prevent similar incidents in the future. The road to reform is long and fraught with resistance, but the director's resolve remains unshaken. Their experience on that quiet suburban road becomes a symbol of the need for vigilance, integrity, and justice, a lesson they vow never to forget. Months have passed since the incident, but its ripple effects are still being felt. The trial of Officer Keller had concluded, and while justice had been served in his case, the story had grown far beyond one individual. The nation is now embroiled in a heated debate over law enforcement reform. News programs feature panels of experts, activists, and law enforcement officials, each offering differing perspectives. Protests, town halls, and public forums spark across the country. The FBI director, now a prominent figure in the movement for accountability, prepares for another press appearance. Their schedule has been relentless: meetings with lawmakers, addressing internal reforms within federal agencies, and overseeing new initiatives to mend trust between law enforcement and the public. In a quiet moment before stepping onto the stage of a university auditorium, the director glances at a folder in their hand. Inside is a report, Implementation of Federal Local Training Standards, Phase 1. It's the first tangible step toward nationwide reform, focusing on de-escalation techniques, cultural sensitivity, and procedural integrity. The auditorium is packed, with every seat filled and a live stream broadcasting the event to thousands online. As the director steps up to the podium, the room falls silent. "Good evening," they begin, their voice steady but firm. "What happened to me on that suburban road could have happened to anyone." It was a stark reminder that authority without accountability is a dangerous thing. But from every challenge comes an opportunity for change. The audience listens intently as the director outlines the progress made since the incident, the overhaul of the local police department, the mandatory training programs now being piloted in several states, and the push for greater transparency in handling complaints against officers. "This is just the beginning," they continue. "The road ahead is long, and there will be resistance. But we cannot falter. Trust is the foundation of law enforcement, and rebuilding it requires effort from all of us, federal, local, and the communities we serve." The applause is thunderous. The director steps away from the podium, taking a seat as the floor opens for questions. A young college student raises her hand and asks, "What keeps you going, even after facing something so personal and dangerous?" The director pauses, choosing their words carefully. "I think about what could have happened that night if I weren't who I am. I think about the people who've faced similar situations and didn't have the resources or voice I did. I keep going because I owe it to them, to make sure their stories lead to change." As the event concludes, the director is approached by attendees, shaking hands and sharing words of support. The energy in the room is hopeful, a stark contrast to the fear and tension of that night months ago. Back at FBI headquarters, the director walks into their office late in the evening. Their desk is cluttered with papers, reports, and letters from citizens thanking them for their efforts. They pick up one letter in particular, written by the family of someone who had been a victim of police misconduct. "Because of your courage, my son's story is finally being heard. Thank you for fighting for justice. The director sits back, the weight of responsibility heavy but welcome. The fight is far from over, but the progress made so far is proof that change is possible. This story is a reminder that even in the face of injustice, resilience and action can pave the way for reform. If you found this story inspiring and want to hear more like it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories that matter. Together, we can keep these conversations alive.